You're not stuck, you just refuse to see your progress. If you constantly feel like you're working hard but getting nowhere, I have news for you. You're probably making more progress than you think, but you're choosing to ignore it. The problem isn't that you're not growing, it's that you've trained yourself to only notice what's missing instead of what's improving, and that's a choice you can change. The self-sabotage pattern. Here's what you're doing without realizing it. Every time you hit a goal, your brain quietly moves the goalposts. Learn a new mix technique? Now you focus on what you still don't know. Finish a song? Now you're worried it's not as good as your influences. Got positive feedback? Now you're just convinced they're just being nice. You're not stuck. You're systematically erasing your own progress, and then you wonder why it feels like nothing's working. The moving goalpost trap. Here's how insidious it gets. When Lyrazone's Parasite broke 500,000 streams on Spotify, or when Chasing Wind hit 500,000 plays on YouTube, or even when I got to work with Buried Alive, I mentally celebrated. But then my brain just reset the bar there. Now when I get a client that gets 4 or 5 figure streams, it doesn't feel like enough, despite my client numbers continually growing. This isn't just being hard on yourself, it's actively undermining your own momentum. When you refuse to acknowledge progress, you're telling your brain that nothing you do matters. When nothing you do matters, why would you keep doing it? You're creating your own motivation problems by dismissing every piece of evidence that you're actually getting better. The confidence versus ego fear. Here's where I sabotaged myself. Internally, I gave myself credit for those hundreds or more demos building my skills, but I didn't let myself get confident for fear of becoming egotistical. Those overconfident people always bothered me, so I would dismiss my skills to make sure I didn't become that. But by not presenting confidence, it cost me more opportunities than I'll ever know. There's often a fine line between confidence and ego, and for a long time I played it way too safe. Here's a perfect example. Back then, if somebody asked me how good I was, my answer was, depends on what you listen to. Who would that sell? Would you buy from that? Doubtful. Nobody wants to hire someone that can't even say they're good at what they do, but that's how I felt I needed to act. The cost of dismissing your progress. Here's another example that stings. Years ago, I was doing cover songs of video games. I had the skills, I had the concept, but I was afraid of being sued by the video game companies, so I never pushed it out. Not long after, somebody else had the same concept, created a band around it, then toured and built a name doing video game covers. My fear kept me from acting, but even my lawyer had said, if you get a cease and desist, at least you're big enough for it to matter. I dismissed my own capability and someone else lived the idea I was too scared to execute. That's what refusing to see your progress costs you. Not just missed recognition, but missed opportunities. The evidence connection. Remember when we talked about building evidence for your confidence? Well, evidence only works if you actually count it. If you keep moving the bar every time you clear it, you'll never build that stack of proof your brain needs to believe you're capable. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You probably have more wins sitting unrecognized than you'll ever realize. The breakthrough moment. Let me tell you about a moment everything changed for me. Last year, I was working with a client named Zane. I'd worked with him multiple times since he was 16, and at 21, he was in town and came back to do a couple of songs. One track in particular was creating an emotional stir during my jog afterwards, and I kept trying to figure out why. I kept listening to a specific vocal harmony that reminded me of the vocalist from one of my favorite bands, Funeral for a Friend. There was this one harmony that kept making emotion rise up, and I couldn't place why.
Metals never lose their attraction to me. Their attraction to me. Their attraction to me. Can't settle when we know you're subtracting from we. You're subtracting from we. No.
So I kept listening to the same part over and over for probably about a half an hour, each time feeling like that emotion swell, but internally I was like, what the hell is going on? Why am I feeling this emotional? Suddenly I broke into tears, and in a weird yet comforting way, an internal voice rose up and said, stop being so hard on yourself. You've already made it. Your goal was to make a difference and to be amongst your favorite artists. This song could have been one on one of the Funeral for a Friend albums that you had on repeat for years. Anything from here is a bonus. You've already achieved what you initially aimed for. That's when I realized I've been so busy moving goalposts that I missed the fact that I'd already crossed the finish line. The system that forces recognition. Stop waiting to feel successful and start documenting success. Daily win documentation. Write down one thing that went right every day. Doesn't matter how small. Finished a verse, learned something new, got positive feedback. Document it somewhere permanent. I used to use Evernote until they changed their pricing. When I didn't renew, I lost all my stored data. So keep it simple. Learn from my mistake. Google Sheets is free. But keep it something you'll actually maintain and not lose. Weekly progress review. Every Sunday, look at your win list and ask, what evidence did I create this week that I'm moving forward? Force yourself to see the pattern. Share the evidence. Post your wins in the community thread, not for validation, for accountability. Making progress visible to others makes it harder for your brain to dismiss. Stop the goalpost game. When you catch yourself thinking, yeah, but that's not really, stop. That's the pattern talking. The wins count whether it feels big enough or not. Personal reality check. You want proof this works? Those breakthrough moments with Lyrazone and Buried Alive? That's when I finally started knowing my worth. My rates went up 2.5 times during this period. My artists were telling me I needed to charge more. In fact, I had a business consultant literally say, "You're afraid to raise your rates, but your clients are literally telling you to. I don't know anyone else with that problem. I don't know what else I can say if that isn't enough proof." He was pushing me to raise them even higher, but I was struggling with it internally. I knew what it was like to be a broke musician. Plus, I was getting pushback from local artists who thought higher rates were too much. Here's the thing, everyone else could see my value increasing except me. When your clients are literally telling you to charge more and you're still second guessing your worth, that's goalpost moving in action. External validation was piling up as evidence of my progress, but I was too busy focusing on what I still couldn't do to see what I'd already mastered. I still struggle with raising rates for these reasons, but I've been slowly moving them up knowing that my value is there. I'm just adding more legs to that confidence stool. The technical progress you're missing. Here's another example. I went VIP to the URM Summit in 2018 and had my song Everything Is Fine mixed critiqued by a professional. His criticism was that the drums and vocals were loud and the guitars were kind of fizzy and the guitar note definition wasn't clear enough. He apologized for ripping it apart and I told him that's what I'm here for. We don't grow from being told what we want to hear. We grow from looking at reality. I caught him afterwards and he recommended SonarWorks for room correction. When I got home, I used that, and I discovered a phasing issue that was canceling out part of my center channel. I'd been overcompensating for years without knowing it. This was where things started to shift in a big way. My, "I'll just get it set up and go to bed," became a night of listening to every mix I'd done for the last few years and going, how did I let that out? Once I had some time learning how the room really sounded, my mixes leveled up in magnitude. Sometimes what feels like lack of progress is actually you developing skills around a technical limitation you don't even know exists. The progress was there, I just couldn't hear it properly. The accountability challenge. Here's where most people will bail. You're going to track wins this week whether you feel like they're worthy or not. Your brain will try and convince you that small progress doesn't count. That's exactly why you need to track it. If you find yourself making excuses about why your wins don't really count, you've just proven why you feel stuck. You're not stuck, you're just refusing to acknowledge movement. Your action steps. This week, document one daily win, no matter how small. Remember, finished beats perfect. Sunday review. Look at your week's evidence and identify the pattern of progress. Community share. Post your biggest win in the weekly wins thread. Build accountability. Call out goalpost moving. When you catch yourself dismissing progress, document it anyway. Community challenge. What I do now. If you never stop and assess your growth, it's easy to keep moving the goalposts. I still move them quickly, but now I at least take a moment to relish in the accomplishment before moving to the next. The fact that I constantly move them due to craving growth likely isn't going to change, but taking the time to appreciate how far I've come helps balance it. Drop a comment below. What's one win from this week that your brain is trying to tell you doesn't count? Share it anyway. Let's build evidence together. Remember, you're not stuck. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're just refusing to see the progress that's already there. The question isn't whether you're moving forward. It's whether you're willing to acknowledge that you are. The life you want might already be closer than you think. Stop moving the goalposts long enough to see where you actually are.